Hi, I'm James Matthews, and this is day 71 of Trump 100. Today, I'm joined by Ronna McDaniel, formerly chair, of course, of the Republican National Committee, only the second woman to occupy that position. Good morning, Ronna.
Good morning. Good to
Yeah,
be with you.
yeah, and great to have you. And Ronna, it says here you are of Republican royalty. You being the niece, of course, of Senator Mitt Romney, which is great. But do you tire of that being mentioned
No,
every time?
no, I mean, my grandfather was also the governor of the state of Michigan where I live,
Right.
so we grew up talking politics at the dinner table, probably unlike well, probably like most families right now, but
Yeah.
politics was part of everyday conversation.
You've stepped back from the front
Yes.
line, of course. Tell me, as you sit back and watch the second Trump administration, what are your headline observations?
You know, what's so interesting for me, James, is I never lived in Washington, D.C. I'm from the state of Michigan, one of those key states that won for Trump. I was chair of Michigan when we won in 2016. So I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing on a regulation front, on the border. I think he's doing a great job.
Hmm. Tell me about the Donald Trump that you know, that you knew when you worked close to him.
Yeah, I got to know him pretty well, maybe in a different way than other people. He was somebody who, if we had a staff member who lost a loved one at the RNC, he would call their family and he would check in on me often. I found him to be very, very kind, especially to me when I was RNC chair and only the second woman. So that side of him, I don't think people see as much, but I really appreciated how kind he was to anybody. If I told him somebody, lost their mother who was a Holocaust victim, he'd go, "Give me their
Mhm.
number. Let me call 'em." And that's the Donald Trump I know that I think a lot of other people don't see.
Yeah, ruthless too. Yeah, ruthless with you
Yeah.
when
He
you ended your time there. It was a meeting in Mar-a-Lago, right?
well, no, we knew, and I knew that that was coming. I mean, listen, he and I had been together for 7 years. I knew it was kind of my end at the RNC, and we had a very lovely meeting, and I think when he texted out that he was gonna transition, he said, "My friend," and I still consider him a friend.
Let me ask you about the story of the moment, I suppose, Signalgate. You know, we had the group chat on Signal with key members of staff who discussed an attack on Houthi rebels. A journalist was included in that. What do you make of that episode?
You know, I think, it was a mistake. The administration's acknowledged that. You've seen Secretary Hegseth and others say this was a mistake. They're not gonna have it again. Luckily, it did not cost lives. This didn't get out before the strike. I think what they're doing with the Houthis is correct. I think this administration is taking the right stance in Yemen, and I think the American people right now are not really worried about it. This isn't something that they're waking up thinking about it. I think it's a DC Beltway bubble story that really doesn't impact the heart of America.
Was it incompetent?
It was a mistake. I mean, I don't know if it was a staffer who put this journalist on Mike Waltz's phone. It was clearly a mistake. But James, let's take a step back and look at where Republicans are. They look at Biden and the Afghanistan withdrawal and Abbygate, not Signalgate, Abbygate, where 13 American lives were lost. And they say that was incompetence. So it is overblown to say that our Secretary of Defense should be fired over a group chat when 13 lives were lost at Abbygate and not a single Democrat spoke out against their own party.
I suppose what Democrats say and have said is that Republicans were screaming for sackings when Hillary Clinton was found to have material on a private email server. So you can't then scream for sackings and right now essentially bat it away.
Well, to intentionally take classified documents and put them on a private server and knowingly do that and then destroy that information is different than a mistaken person put on a group chat.
What about the substance of that signal chat, which referred to European allies, talking about how they were pathetic, and there was a very much a dismissive attitude towards Europeans. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I'm not going to comment on what other people said on that chat, but I will just say, I mean, President Trump has made it very clear that he cares about our European allies, and that's where this administration stands.
Hmm. As a political phenomenon, he is different, though, isn't he? Yes, there were constituencies that decided they wanted a change, But we're in a situation where power seems to be centered on the one individual alone in a way that it never has been in the past. What is it about Donald Trump that, sure, carries the vote of particular constituencies, but also seems to instill a fear, if that's what it is, in people around him, Republicans? There is no Republican dissent within the party that there was throughout his first term. Now it's almost, all hail to the chief, literally, as a policy.
They very much support him. I mean, you saw senators that in the past had not always been with him, like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, support every one of his nominees except for Secretary Hegseth. He really has coalesced the entire Republican Party about behind him. But I don't think it's just him; it's his supporters, right? So if he goes and endorses in a primary, that candidate is most likely going to win that primary. So it's the power of the people that support him that he holds.
Is it fear, though, Ronna? Because we hear continually about Republicans who say, look, I'm not happy about this or that, but I wouldn't challenge him because I will be primaried. I will be maneuvered out of the picture. And Elon Musk is standing behind him with the money to make my life more difficult.
I really do think they support him in a way that they didn't before. A lot of it is because there's 4 years that transpired in between. And we saw Biden. Biden ran as this normalizer. I'm going to unify the country. I'm going to bring us together. I'm going to be this great peacemaker in this country. And he didn't do that. He had an opportunity to do that. He didn't work across the aisle. The left went so extreme. We saw a huge crisis at our border. We saw Bidenomics, huge inflation in our country, and people's lives generally didn't get better. So I think it's Trump leaving for 4 years and seeing the consequences of having Democrats, and the Democrats did want total power. They were going to get rid of the filibuster in our country. They talked about stacking the Supreme Court, fundamentally changing the workings of our Constitution, and I think that has coalesced the Republican Party behind Donald Trump.
In terms of the Supreme Court, Donald Trump, of course, did appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. It is conservative leaning. Much about what Donald Trump has done with regard to executive orders and so on is heading for the Supreme Court. And the accusation from opponents and from neutral observers, I would suggest, Ronna, is that this country is heading for a constitutional crisis because you have a president who wants a power that is close to absolute power and doesn't care about uh, the consequences with regard to the threat to the Constitution. What do you say to that?
The Trump administration has been abiding by the courts. We have these equal branches, right? And the courts have, um, as they've gone forward and it's working through, they're filing appeals, they're going through the proper process, and it will end up at the Supreme Court. But this Supreme Court, as the country has, envisioned, I think it is independent.
Some of these cases relate to the Constitution directly. Birthright citizenship, for example, an executive order on that, which is currently being challenged. Donald Trump, he seems to be challenging some of the basic principles set out in the Constitution. Why would a president do that?
I don't view him as doing that as much as I viewed the Democrats of doing that. I mean, they really were wanting to stack the Supreme Court. They talked
Oh,
about that.
sorry,
They want
Ronna. On
the
birthright
filibuster.
citizenship, though,
But I do think you have to remember, James, too, that for the 4 years that Trump was gone, he had a complete policy arm outside of the White House, figuring out ways that they were going to challenge and push back on things that they felt could be interpreted differently in the courts. And they were going to push that agenda. And they came in ready to go. And especially when it comes to the bureaucracy in DC with these huge government agencies that are unelected, essentially making policy that aren't governed by Congress that were pushed through the executive branch. I think the president and his team said we're going to challenge some of this and we're going to restructure it. He is a disruptor, but he is abiding by the framework of the Constitution, which is taking it to the courts.
When we have the Vice President JD Vance tweeting, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power, and then Elon Musk, who has called repeatedly for the impeachment of judges, he's donating to Republicans in Congress who've supported for doing that. What does that say about respect for the judiciary on the part of the current administration?
Y I think the fact that they are going through the proper process and I'm gonna take what the president said. So the president said in the White House, in the Oval Office, "We are gonna go through the courts, we're gonna go through the proper appeals process, and we're gonna abide by the courts." And that's the right thing to do. They can have opinions about individual judges, and there are judges who are elected that are certainly, leaning more Republican or Democrat. It's done differently in every state. Some of them actually have to declare a party affiliation when they're elected. So they can have different opinions on judges, but ultimately we're going to respect the ruling of the Supreme Court.
Let me ask you about Elon Musk, Ronna.
Yeah.
Does he have too much power?
I don't think so. I will say this. I spent time with Elon. Elon, he thinks differently than anybody I've ever met. He is truly brilliant. He really does want to help this country, I believe. I also think Donald Trump greatly benefited from Elon putting 290 million into this election and building this ground game. He's doing the same thing as in Wisconsin. But I'm not worried about what he's doing. I think it's good to make our government more efficient.
Is there recklessness in the way he's going about it? Most people, you wouldn't argue that government needs to be cut, waste needs to be got rid of to some extent. But there was the mistaken firing of employees within the nation's nuclear stockpile last
Right.
month. I mean, broader cuts at the energy department, and there was a scramble to rehire them. And we have the website where they publish cuts online. It's riddled with errors. They listed $8 million of a contract as being worth $8 billion on this wall of receipts. There is a sloppiness, a recklessness, and a general lack of accountability. Those are the accusations aimed at Elon Musk.
He said, "We do make mistakes. We're gonna make mistakes, like a batter getting up to bat. They're not gonna bat 1,000." He said, "But we have to admit it and rectify it." And I think also the president coming into that cabinet meeting and saying, "Doge is not gonna be responsible for firing personnel. It's gonna be up to the cabinet secretaries," which I think is the right way to do it.
How do you see the dynamic between Donald Trump and Elon Musk? And I wonder how you see that relationship evolving, Rona, as somebody, who knows both men.
I think they greatly admire each other. I think they understand business. They understand regulation. They understand how regulation in our country, there's so much regulation that it's actually curbing innovation. Elon Musk going into the space field. You don't get to launch a spaceship or SpaceX in this country without going through a ton of regulation and security. So I think they have a mutual language of business that they understand and respect about each other.
Yeah, mutual nose for business. Clearly, men who know what they want, know how to get it, and that doesn't necessarily involve a partnership forever. I just wonder. Much talk about how long the friendship, the relationship
I
can
know.
last. How long do you think it can
I know
last?
everybody forecasts a breakup, and I don't see it that way. Elon, when I've spoken to him, he's very soft spoken. He's a very good listener and listens, and it's almost like he's inputting everything you're saying, and it's lodged in his brain forever. He's truly brilliant. President Trump also has incredible retention. He remembers things. I think they respect each other. I don't see this relationship fizzling, so I'll be on the long term relationship end of the betting pool.
All right. Okay. How much do you want to put on that, Rona?
Okay, okay. Let's get a betting fight going.
Let me ask you, Rona. I don't know if you caught an exchange between our own Martha Kellner and Marjorie Taylor
Did.
Greene. Did you see that?
I did see it, yes.
First of all, what did you think of that? I mean, Martha being told go back to your own country, as if her question was irrelevant.
Well, I kept my appointment to be on Sky News, so I think I'm showing you how I feel about that by being on your broadcast.
For which we're grateful. But I wonder what that says. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's a woman who has the ear of President Trump.
President Trump obviously loves the UK. He's been very open about that, and she represents herself. But here I am with Sky News, so I think you guys are doing a great job. I love your 100-day podcast. I've been
Oh,
listening to it.
well, thank you for saying that. Do you think Donald Trump will run for a third term? I know the rules
I don't.
say he cannot, but who knows? Who knows in the world of Donald Trump? Do you think he'll aim for that, try to make that happen?
I don't, but here's where you get to my expertise. I'm not a policy expert, but I do understand politics. And I
Hmm.
think something that's been really underreported this past week is the fact that JD Vance took over as finance chair for the Republican National Committee. This has never happened in the history of the party where the vice president said, I'm going to be the finance lead for the national party. So what does that mean? It means he's going to interact with all the major investors heading into 2028. He's going to know them intimately. But more importantly, in the next 2 years, the Republican National Committee will be passing the rules that will govern the primary process for 2028. What states will be first, what primaries will be first. That whole process will be passed in the next 2 years by different state parties across the country. JD will have access to every single RNC member and Republican National Committee state chair who will be making those governing rules. That shows you the power that he has right now as the runner up or the next in line in our party.
Yeah, is that who your money's on as the next
That
nominee?
my money would be on that. Yeah, I mean that's a power move from a political standpoint, and somebody who understands how the rules are made because I was there for so long, longer than
Hmm.
anybody, right? 7
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Um, and intimately understanding that process, which is boring and very technical, and most people don't understand how the RNC works. That was a huge move this week for JD to take over as finance chair for the RNC.
What kind of president do you think he will make?
Well, that's getting way ahead, but
Oh, he would make. Okay.
well, I know JD pretty well. I spent a lot of time with him in Ohio when I was chair when he ran for Senate in
Yeah.
Ohio, so I campaigned with him a lot. I think what I appreciated about him the most was in smaller settings with business leaders or town halls with voters. He took every question. He's truly, truly, truly brilliant. But right now, his focus is to support President Trump and the administration that he's serving in.
Do you think in European capitals they'll be trembling at the prospect of a JD Vance presidency?
I don't. I think when we look at our country in a short period of time, when you see the deregulation, regulation is such a problem in our country. We have so many regulations, and Trump's first administration, for every one new regulation, he would get rid of 10. And the energy independence, unleashing our energy dominance in the world, those two things, and then fixing our border. I think it's going to be a huge success for us economically, like we were seeing in his first term before COVID.
And what are you doing yourself these days, Ronna? Will you be making the big comeback at some point?
I'm doing work in the private sector and I'm really enjoying learning the business side of things, which is probably fueling my passion against regulation because I'm seeing how much regulation is stymieing innovation in our country.
Hmm.
And I love it. And I never planned to be a Washington person full time. I never moved there. I love the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to get my two kids out of college and get them jobs. And
Aren't we
you know
all?
how that is. It's rough.
Yeah. Great stuff. Well, listen, Ronna McDaniel, many thanks for your
Thank you.
time.
Thanks for having me.
That's day 71 of Trump 100. If you have any questions for me or the team, Martha and Mark, you can email us at trump100 at sky.uk. Join us again tomorrow for day 72.